In this video, I'm going to explain you the whole process of buying property in Spain, before, during, and after the whole property transaction, with a focus on foreign buyers. We will start with what to do before you even start viewing properties. Then we'll go into due diligence, what to check physically, legally, and from an urban planning perspective. After that, contracts, reservation agreements, deposits, and the clauses that protect you. Then financing and the notary signing, and finally the post-purchase steps people forget until it's too late. This is a very special video to me, since I'm going to be explaining what we do on a daily basis and what my father has been doing for the last 35 years. My name is Daniel Bertomeu, and together we run Expat Abogados, a law firm specialized in conveyancing property purchase transactions by non-residents in Spain. Let's start with the video. Let's start with the basics. In Spain, the price of the property is not the final cost. On top of the price that you're going to be paying, you have to add some other expenses. Taxes, notary fees, land registry fees, our legal fees if you decide to hire us as your lawyer or solicitor for the property purchase, if not another professional, and a few other items depending on the deal. Most of the time, you're looking at roughly 10 to 14% on top of the purchase price. And that depends mainly on two things: where you buy and whether it's a new build or a resale property. So, when does it actually make sense to buy a house in Spain? It depends if you're buying as an investment or as a place to live, but at the same time, when you're buying a property to live there, you also see it as an investment. So a general rule I would say is that if you buy a property in Spain, you must be able to hold it at least for 5 years. Because if not, maybe the property purchase price has gone up, but it's not enough to cover with the cost, taxes, and expenses that the property will cost. Lots of our clients are plus 35 years old, and this is something important if you're buying as a married couple. In Spain, it's not always we're buying as a couple, so it's 50-50. Your marital regime status matters. If you are a foreign buyer, there are 3 things that you will need early. First, the NIE number. This is the basic document to buy property or do any procedure in Spain. Second, if you're buying remotely, a power of attorney is recommended. Third, a Spanish bank account. Not always mandatory, but in real life it makes everything easier. Alright, this is very basic, but now I will talk about something that must be of your interest: how taxes work for properties in Spain and mortgages for non-residents. First, second-hand properties or resale homes. If you're buying a second house property, the main tax you will pay is the ITP, or Impuesto de Transmisiones Patrimoniales. Basically, this is the transfer tax. Okay, Daniel, but how much do I have to pay for this tax? And their answer is that it depends where in Spain you're buying property. In Alicante and Valencia region, typically around 10%. Andalucía between 7 to 9% depending on price brackets. Madrid is the lowest with 6%, Balearic Islands, Mallorca, Ibiza around 8 to 11%, Canary Islands around 6.5%, and Catalonia approximately 10%. So let's say you're buying a property for €500,000 in Alicante. The ITP by itself is €50,000. There are no other specific property purchases taxes for second-home properties. It's pretty straightforward. Now, the story is different if what you're buying is a new build property, or in Spanish, obra nueva. In this case, first you pay VAT or IVA. That's a flat 10% on top of the price. And on top of VAT, you pay another tax called AJD, or Actos Jurídicos Documentados. Basically a stamp duty. It's around 1 to 1.5% of the property price, depending on the region. Following with the previous example, if you buy a €500,000 house in Alicante, the VAT or IVA would be €50,000 and the AJD would be €7,500. That is €57,000 only in taxes. These are the taxes you will pay for buying property in Spain. Later in the video, I will explain the taxes you must pay yearly if you own a property in Spain. Now, let's talk about mortgages for non-residents in Spain. Because for many foreign buyers, the question is not how much does the property cost, but how much is a Spanish bank willing to lend me? The good news is simple. If you're a non-resident, you can get a mortgage in Spain. The difference is that banks are usually more conservative. In most cases, they will expect you to bring in a larger deposit than a resident buyer. As a broad rule, many non-resident buyers should expect to contribute somewhere around 30 to 40% of the purchase price from their own funds. The exact number depends on the bank, the property, and above all, your financial profile. As for interest rates, non-resident mortgages are often a bit more expensive than resident ones. It doesn't have to happen always, but the rule is simple. Compare several offers. When we talk about mortgages in Spain, you will probably hear these three types, which I'm pretty sure is how it works in most of the world. Fixed rate, where the interest stays the same throughout. Variable rate, where it moves with an index, usually Euribor. And mixed rate, which starts fixed for a period and then becomes variable later. I could talk more about mortgages for non-residents, but I just wanted to point out the main ideas. Don't forget that this is a general guide, so if you already know this part of the process, you can skip to the next one. And also I want to tell you that I will be preparing specific guides on each section that you're going to see on this video. So if you're enjoying, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button and you subscribe. But now let's move into chapter 2, area and price research. In this chapter, I will show you a simple process to research a location properly, sanity checks prices, read market signals, and spot red flags before you fall in love with a property. First, your goal decides what good means. This is basically what kind of buyer you are. If you're buying to live in the property or as a second home, your focus is lifestyle, access, noise, safety, year-round vibe, services, and the real cost of maintaining the house. If you're buying to rent long-term, it's a different game. Real rental demand, how fast properties get rented, tenant profiles, and whether the asset is easy to manage from abroad. If you're buying for short-term rental, Airbnb or Booking, then legality is the first filter. Licenses, local rules, community restrictions, and only after that do you look at the numbers like occupancy, seasonality, and average rates. Without the legal side, the returns can be pure fantasy. Now, let's see the process, step by step. Step 1. Start with Idealista, but use it correctly. If you search for homes in Spain, you will end up in Idealista sooner or later. And this is where most of the deals actually happen. I was at an event with a large real estate agency a few weeks ago, and they told me that 80% of their deals come through Idealista. The key is to understand that Idealista shows the asking prices, not the final prices. What Idealista is great for, but before, and I'm sure no one is questioning about this, but this video has no sponsors but me and the law firm that I run alongside my father. I just say Idealista because it's the biggest platform, but there are 2 or 3 others. Idealista is very useful for seeing what's actually available in your area, understanding the range of asking prices, spotting difference that can explain price gaps, views, lift, terrace, parking, renovation, building quality, seeing if the area is full of inventory or if there's barely anything worth buying, and tracking listing that keeps dropping or don't move at all. Another Idealista feature that many people don't know about is the price history tool. For example, let's look at Moraira. We can select the last month, but we can also choose the last 3 months, the last year, or even the full historical data. This lets you quickly see how prices have evolved in the area and understand if the market is rising, falling, or stable. Step 2. Check real transaction data. Now let's move on to a source that many foreign buyers don't know, but also Spanish buyers don't know, and it's extremely helpful. It's the official statistics website run by the Spanish notaries. In Spanish, it's called El Portal Estadístico del Notariado. Think of this website as an interactive map giving you real market information based on actual property sales completed at the notary. Usually, you can select any area and see clear numbers like average price per square meter, average size of homes sold, typical purchase price, and how many sales happened recently. It helps you answer one basic question: how much should I expect to pay in this area? But this is a warning: don't rely only on these statistics or websites. Why? A property can easily cost 20 to 30% more than the average price for several reasons: views, how new the property is, facilities, services around. And the truth is that, Spain is quite big and there are several markets within Spain, but especially in coastal areas, there's a scarcity of houses. There's a strong demand by people that are willing to pay lots of money to own a property here, but there are just not enough good quality houses for this demand. I'm from Moraira and we work in the Costa Blanca area, Alicante province especially, and this is a big deal. This is a quick extra if you want to dig deeper. For broader market trends, you can also check official statistics from the Spanish Property Registrars or the INE. This is the National Statistics Institute. These won't tell you the exact price for a specific house, but they are helpful to understand if prices are generally rising, stable, or falling. Once you have all this data, I think you have enough information to justify why a house is considered premium or why the price is quite low. This is very simple and very obvious, but I want you to keep something in your mind, especially if you're buying in a big city like Alicante, Valencia, Madrid. In Spain, during the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was a real housing problem, like the one we have today. So the government of that time decided to build many new buildings. The problem is that the quality of these buildings is not the best. This can happen in apartments, but can also happen in bungalows where, I don't know, again, if I give Moraira as an example, it's because it's the town where I'm from. In Moraira, you will find lots of bungalows and some of them have an attractive price compared to other properties. The problem is that you might end up hearing when the other person downstairs is flushing the toilet or farting. I don't know, many situations that can happen that, I think is something that you really need to know. Chapter 3, the physical reality of the property or the physical due diligence. At this point, you will probably have found one or two properties that you will really like. And here is where a very important part of the whole process starts, and is the due diligence. I will separate it between the physical due diligence and then the legal side of it. The truth is that me, my father, and all the people that work in Expat Abogados are experts on the legal due diligence, but this is more a personal trait of me. One of my passions is architecture and this kind of things, because it's something that goes beyond my area of knowledge, and therefore, whenever it's possible, I like to go with the surveillance team to the property to see the state of the property itself, and therefore I think I've got enough knowledge to give you the key physical checks that you should do when buying a property in Spain. I will explain a few common things that apply to any property, and then I will talk about specific types of properties such as obra nueva or new build properties or resale homes, etc., etc. What I'm going to be saying now applies to any property, and a very important document that you need in order to check the physical reality of the property is the so-called Certificado Energético, in English, Energy Proficiency Certificate. Basically, it gives the property an energy rating, and it estimates energy consumption and CO2 emissions based on standard assumptions. It also usually includes basic information about the house's envelope and systems, things like insulation level, windows, and the type of heating or cooling or hot water system. But here's an important limitation. The energy certificate is not a full survey and it's not a guarantee. And with this, I mean that a house can have a decent energy certificate rating and still have problems with humidity, bad sound insulation, or poor workmanship. Still, if the rating is low, take it seriously. It usually means one of two things. The property may be less comfortable, or it may cost more to run, or both. And if your plan is to rent, it also affects how easy it is to market the property, because tenants increasingly ask about bills and comfort. Number two, water and humidity. This is one of the most common issues that some properties in Spain have, and also it's one of the defects, the easiest to hide with a fresh coat of paint. So when you visit, don't just look, inspect. A simple trick: use your phone flashlight and shine it along the wall at an angle. If there are invisible patches, bubbles, uneven plaster, or signs of moisture, that side light will reveal what normal light hides. Also, pay attention to the usual danger zones: corners, behind furniture, around windows, under terrace doors, ceilings under bathrooms, and any rooms that smells closed or musty. Number three, cracks versus cosmetic lines. In Spanish, fisuras versus grietas. Sorry if the translation is not the best, but I'm sure it's good enough to understand each other. Not every mark on a wall is a disaster. Older homes often have small hairline lines in plaster. That can be normal. What you don't want to ignore are deep, white cracks, cracks that look like a stair shape, cracks around corners of windows, or signs that suggest movement, like doors that do not close properly or floors that feel uneven. And four, insulation, sound and temperature. I already talked about this in the previous point, so I don't want to extend it too much, but I will say something that it's important for you to understand, especially in older homes. And I say this because I worked in countries like Germany and Switzerland, and the weather in Spain can be unbelievable, but your house can be very cold in winter and very hot in summer. So this is something that, especially if you're buying in Spain, I would be very cautious about. All right, so I mentioned a few points that I think applies to any property. Now I would like to go deeper on some kind of properties that usually foreigners buy. I will start with high-value new build properties, or obra nueva. And here, the biggest mistake that I see is that people tend to think that it's completely normal that new means perfect, and it's not. New builds usually do not have the classic old house issues. The risk is different: execution, quality. So you're looking for workmanship and finishing. Check the seals in bathrooms and showers, the joints around terrace doors, the alignment of windows and sliding doors, uneven tiles, poor drainage on terraces, water pooling, cracks in fresh paint, and anything that looks rushed. If there's an important piece of advice that I can give you in this point, is the following. Prepare a defects list, because you want the problems to be solved while the responsibility is on the seller and developer side. And I also recommend you to hire an independent technical inspection from that property before you accept it, not from anyone that is not you privately. And I really insist on this because a few months ago I was checking a company in Denia, so we are from Alicante, offices in Moraira and Denia, that builds properties. And it's unbelievable the amount of bad reviews that I saw. I'm not saying that all of them are true, but they were all talking about small problems that you couldn't see as a human unless you lived on that apartment for months or maybe even years. So this is something to be very careful about. And also because I think there's a good comparison between that technical inspection independent and our job as independent lawyers for property purchase transactions. Because the truth is that when you're buying property in Spain, the real estate will offer you legal services from a lawyer they know. In some cases, the real estate agency has a legal team. But think about it. The incentives are completely different. If you accept that, the lawyer will just accept it because their work is to make sure the deal is done, while our job as independent solicitors for property transactions is to make sure that the investment is safe, and if we see problems with the property and we don't see like you should buy, we tell you that straight and you will find another property and we will carry on with our job. But Yes, if you're looking to buy a property in Spain, I will leave the contact information here and also in the description of the video. So let's continue. Type 2, older villas and especially countryside houses. With villas, many buyers focus only on the interior, and that's a mistake. With a house, the outside is just as important as the inside, sometimes even more. Walk the perimeter. Look at the base of the walls. Look for rising damp signs. Look at the roofline, gutters, downpipes, and terraces. Water management is everything in a villa, because when water gets in, repairs get expensive fast. And also look for signs of movement. Cracks near corners, cracks in exterior walls, retaining walls that look tired, and even paths or areas where drainage looks wrong. And with villas, don't forget that ventilation and orientation matter a lot. A house can be beautiful, but if it's closed most of the year and it doesn't breathe well, you can end up with humidity and comfort issues even without visible leaks. Up to now in this chapter, we've talked about things that you can see, but now we're going to talk about something that is as important, and it's utilities and installations. This matters for two reasons. First, because you might be buying a property that needs work and you need to budget properly. And second, because some of the most expensive surprises are hidden behind walls and people only discover them after they've already signed. Let's start with electricity. If the electrical installation is old, updating it can be a serious cost. Sometimes it's not a small repair, it's a full upgrade, new wiring, new safety devices, and sometimes opening walls and fixing everything again afterwards. Now here's the trap many foreign buyers do not see coming: putting the electricity contract into your name. In Spain, that's the called cambio de titularidad, and in many cases it's simple. But if the installation is very old and the electrical certificate is missing or outdated, the utility company can refuse to change the contract until the installation is updated to current standards. So before buying a property in Spain, always ask for el boletín eléctrico. You may also hear it as the CIE, which stands for Certificado de Instalación Eléctrica. If there's no valid certificate, you might not be able to get the supply properly transferred, or in some cases, even reconnected quickly. While I was preparing the script, and especially while recording the video, I'm thinking that maybe I'm being too intense. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but surely the longest one that I've ever made. And I didn't even start talking about the legal side of it, which is our specialty, contracts, what happens after buying the property. But I really wanted to give you a full picture. I really want to explain you step by step how the process works. In many cases, what I'm explaining now is something that the real estate agent can do for you, or you can hire someone independent like a technical surveyor, or in Spanish it's arquitecto técnico. And with this, I also want to say, we are only lawyers and tax advisors, but we are very used to work with arquitectos técnicos. So especially if you are buying in the area of Alicante and you want me to connect you with this kind of professional, or even a real estate agent, because there are many and there are not so many that do their work properly. So if that's the case, you can also contact me. Let's continue. Water and plumbing. In coastal areas especially, it's common to find limescale and calcified pipes, but it can happen anywhere. A simple pressure test. Open several taps at the same time. If the pressure drops a lot, that's a warning sign. Also check under sinks and inside cabinets for swelling, stains, or fresh repairs. And do something most people never do, and I understand it since you are going to be looking weird in front of the real estate agent, but come on, it's a big investment. You will have to make sure about this. Go to the bathroom and kitchen and smell the drains. If there's a really bad smell, it can point to issues with the siphon or drainage. Not always expensive, but it tells you the system may not be in a great shape. If you're buying a villa or a countryside house, add 2 quick questions that can save you a headache later. What is the water source? Mains water, a deposit, a well, or a mix? And what about wastewater? Mains drainage or a septic tank? And here's why this matters. In rural purchases, it's not unusual to discover that the septic tank needs to be upgraded or replaced. That can easily become a serious cost, sometimes 7,000 to 15,000 range, depending on the property. This is exactly the kind of issue you want to spot early because it affects the price and it needs to be dealt with in the contract. Either the seller fixes it or you budget it properly and negotiate based on real numbers. Now, hot water, heating, and air conditioning. Before you buy, identify the system. Is it mains gas, bottled gas, electric, heat pump, and how old is it? In many houses, especially those built in the 70s, 80s, it's common to find boilers and water heaters near the end of their life. And boilers do not die on a convenient day. They die the week you arrive. Also, check air conditioning. Does it cool the bedrooms or only the living room? How old are the units? Replacing or upgrading AC can be a real cost, especially if you want the property comfortable year-round or rentable in summer. Now, a quick reality check. Sellers will not always highlight these issues. And with this, I'm not saying that sellers are the devils because it's not true. We help buyers and sellers, but it's just that some sellers will be more transparent about these kind of things and some others will not. So it's important that you know these kind of things because you can accept it or not, or you can use it as a tool to negotiate the price based on how much it will cost you to repair these things. Later in the video, in the post-purchase section, I will show you what you have to do with utilities after signing, so you don't get stuck with this. But before we move on to the next point, I want to make a special, it's not a bonus, but this only applies if you are buying an apartment that is in a building, basically. And I want you to keep something on your mind. When you are buying an apartment, you are basically buying a share of the entire building. So the building problems can become your problems. So there are three words that I want you to know. The first one is the ITE, in Spanish, Inspección Técnica de Edificios. In many areas, older buildings must pass periodic technical inspection. If the inspection finds issues, the building may have deadlines, follow-ups, and repairs to do. And if those repairs are serious, the cost can be huge. The second word is derrama. A derrama is basically a one-off special payment that owners have to contribute to when the building needs major works, facade repairs, roof issues, structural fixes, plumbing in common areas, lifts, things like that. These are not small bills. And the third word is actas, the community meeting minutes. This is where you see the real story, not the story from the viewing, the real one. You can find ongoing leaks, neighbor conflicts, owners not paying, and most importantly, whether major works have already been discussed or approved. Let me give you one simple example. Imagine you buy a flat and only afterwards you discover the community approved a lift installation or a major facade repair. And because of your coefficient, your share is massive. That's the kind of surprise that can destroy your budget overnight. Now, let's move on into the legal due diligence of the process of buying a property in Spain. And of course, this is my favorite part of the video since it's what we do on a daily basis. And it's what my father has been doing for the last 35 years. And I'm going to be explaining everything crystal clear. What documents we ask for, the different contracts from the moment you agree on a price until the notary signing, the real risks when buying a property in Spain. And this is made from our experience, so it's going to be super useful for lots of you. And I already said it a few times along the video, but when buying a property in Spain, please hire an independent solicitor. Why do I say this? Because if problems arise, you can go to court, but court cases in Spain take several years. And maybe you're right, maybe you're not right, maybe the court says you're right, but the other party takes it to a higher court and the second court says you're not right. So this is a process that can be delayed in years. And well, the best problem is the one you avoided, and this is basically our work. So at least I want you to pay attention. The first document is the Nota Simple from el Registro de la Propiedad or Land Registry. This is the most basic an important document, I would say, because it tells you who owns the property and what is registered against the property, mortgages, attachment, and other registered rights. And yes, sometimes the person selling the property is not yet the registered owner. The most common case is inheritance. The family says, we own it, but the registration hasn't been updated. That can delay the sale, complicate the signing, or block the deal if it's not handled correctly. The nota simple can also show rights that completely change what you think you're buying. For example, a usufructo or a derecho de habitación. In simple terms, someone else may have the legal right to use the property. So even if you buy it, you might not be able to live there until that right ends. So the nota simple is the most basic document you'll need when buying property in Spain. But watch out! The nota simple gives you a lot of useful information, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. And this is where I would point out the difference between truly professionals in the sector, qualified lawyers, solicitors, and people acting as legal experts but actually don't know. Later in the video, I will point out some of the risks that do not appear in the nota simple. Next, we ask for the previous deed, or la escritura pública. Why is the last deed so important? Because it tells you, for example, does the price include the parking space, a storage room, a terrace, a share of a communal area? What are the official boundaries? What are the ownership shares? Are there any special conditions mentioned? Document 3, Catastro and the latest EB receipt. Think of the Catastro as the administrative and tax description. The land registry is legal ownership and register rights. In many cases, they match, but differences still happen, especially in older properties. Why does it matter? First, ongoing costs. EB is linked to Catastro, and it's part of owning the property. Second, banks and valuation. If paperwork shows different sizes, banks don't like uncertainty. If the registry says 60 square meters and Catastro says 100 square meters, a bank might lend using the lower figure because banks don't want legal risks. And third, in villas and land, these details can affect what you can do later, what you can build, renovate, or legalize. And then la ficha urbanística. I already talked about this in a previous chapter, but I think I should have left it for this one. But well, in case you just came to this one, it's basically a document that allows you to see what can be built or not in the pieces of land that you have around you. This is actually more useful and important than what many people think. Okay, so these are documents that you need for any kind of property. Now we're going to see some specific types of property, off-plan, so new build properties, off-plan properties, and apartments that are part of a community of property owners. Now, as I was saying, hiring an independent lawyer is very important when buying a property in Spain. And if I can say something that is quite attractive about our services is that we don't work under commissions. We work under fixed fees. And I thought this was the normal, but the more I learn about other lawyers, other firms, I think our services are probably the safest and the cheapest investment you can do when buying a property in Spain. Just to give you a little bit more information about us, we're based in Moraira and Denia. This is the Costa Blanca, Alicante. So if you're buying from anywhere from Castellón to Murcia, even Andalucía, especially Almería or Balearic Islands, from Denia you take a boat in 2 hours, we're in Ibiza. We take a plane from Alicante, 1 hour, we are in Mallorca. And I say this with a big, I'm very excited about saying this because it makes me very happy to travel around Spain and do this kind of works. If we have to travel there 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, it's a big pressure to me. So wherever you're buying property in Spain, if you want good and trustworthy legal and tax advice, come with us. You'll see the contact information here. Also in the description, you can check our website, our offices. It's not to show off, but we've got plenty of good reviews of real clients. And well, we started getting these reviews for the last 2 years or so. I cannot imagine how many we would have if my father would know about this maybe 10 years ago, but still, I honestly say this, whenever buying a property in Spain, always independent legal support, and not just the legal side of it, but also the taxes, because it's actually very linked. I think that a real estate or a solicitor must be also a tax expert, especially if you're dealing with non-residents, with international clients, and that's our case. You can see other videos that I have talking about special tax regimes and more other videos that I'm preparing that maybe you can already see depending on where you're watching this. I've got plenty of topics to talk about, super interesting. It just, as you understand, these videos take a lot of time. So let's continue. So the first special case is if you're buying from a promotor or developer, or if you're buying a new build property, obra nueva. Here, the logic of the deal changes. The risks are different, the documents are different, and especially important, the way you handle your payments changes as well. Now, within obra nueva or new build properties, you have two main scenarios. Obra nueva terminada, a finished new build ready to move in, or compra sobre plano, off-plan property that's still under construction. Let's start with the obra nueva terminada or finished new build, and the first document that I recommend you asking for is the Memoria de Calidades. I'm sure you will get it. Because this is the document that tells you precisely what you're buying: windows and insulation, flooring and tiles, kitchen appliances and bathroom fittings, air conditioning and heating system, built-in wardrobes, parking spaces, storage rooms, or common areas, pool, gym, gardens. And here's the classic risk. The brochure looks amazing. The renders, unbelievable. But then what you get is not what they promised in this document. Under Spanish law, all advertising, promotional materials, and offers must be truthful, accurate, and legally binding. So when I say check the Memoria de Calidades, I don't mean glance at it, I mean check it carefully. Then comes the second point that often surprises foreign buyers, and is that your house can be physically ready, but administratively, or because of some document bureaucracy, you cannot legally live on it. And the document you need for this is la licencia de primera ocupación. This document defines whether you can actually start using the house normally. Without it, utilities, resale, and even basic occupation can become complicated. And these are other documents that are actually very important. The first one of them is El Libro del Edificio, or the building book. This contains a lot of information, some of the one that I was saying already. Very important, construction warranties, and yeah, in Spanish it's called seguro decenal. Let's say decenal insurance. Well, if not, I will look for the translation and I will put it here. But basically, this is a 10-year structural guarantee required by law in Spain. Finally, something many promoters offer: subrogating into the developer's mortgage. This can be easy and convenient, and in lots of cases is the good way to go. What I'm saying is that do not accept it automatically. Check it with the mortgage you would get from your own. Also bear in mind that starting a mortgage in Spain can create some taxes, so it's not just the cost of the mortgage, but also of this. But well, what I'm saying is that compare before just accepting it. And with this, I think the first special point is covered, and now we're going with off-plan properties that is very linked to a new build properties, but it's not exactly the same. If the property is still under construction or you're paying before it's delivered, the crucial issue is not what type of flooring am I getting. Don't get me wrong, of course this is important, but the most important question for you should be: how is my money legally protected until the property is fully finished and delivered? And let me tell you that I have some experience on this, not only from the buying process, but also because previously I worked in a criminal law firm in Madrid, actually one of the best. And I remember more than 3 cases of protecting potential criminals, because the truth is that I really think they did wrong, but when we're talking about criminal law, it's about the evidence. But people that, okay, we're going to build a series of properties here. They took the money, they transferred it to some other accounts, and well, at the end, what happens with these people? They lost a lot of money. This is not to scare you, but just to pay attention to this point, please. When you buy sobre plano or off plan, the question should be, where is my money going? Who receives it? Under what conditions? And what protection do I have if something goes wrong? This is where the developer's professionalism matters a lot. If the seller is a company, the promotor, then the payment must be made clearly and transparently to the company account, not casually into someone's private account, and certainly not abroad. If I say this, it's because we've seen it with our own eyes. In Moraira, again, I hope that in this point of the video, you know that I'm Daniel from Moraira. There was a property transaction off plan, and we were defending the buyer. So the promoter wanted the money to be transferred into a private Dutch account, and we said, look, no, the money is going to go to company's account and in Spain. Why? Because, look, the fact that they wanted this has nothing to do with fraud or anything, but if something happens in the future, this becomes critical. And as I say at the beginning of this chapter, our work basically is to prevent any problem that could arise in the future, and this is one of those details. Remember, the core concept here is traceability. Your money must pass through the correct documented channel. Paperwork must match every payment exactly, and your protection must be clear before you send any significant funds. Spanish law is clear on this. When a developer collects money from buyers before completion, those payments must go into a designated bank account, a cuenta especial, specifically linked to the construction project. Moreover, advance payments must be protected either by a bank guarantee or an insurance policy or seguro de caución. The idea here is straightforward. If your project is not finished or delivered on time, you must have a direct route to get your money back. And now let me share with you a practical route that could work for you. Sometimes promoters start making projects before obtaining the final construction license or licencia de obras. This in itself is not necessarily illegal, but when you start making substantial payments, you must know precisely what protection is in place and what concrete milestone trigger each payment. For me, the license itself, licencia de obras, is a critical milestone. If the license is granted, that's an objective fact, one you can clearly verify, document, and use as a condition to release funds. This is exactly how I like to structure these off-plan purchases, not based on vague promises and optimism, but based on objective milestones and facts. These milestones might be simple and clear, like license obtained, yes or no, structural work completed, utilities installed, specific phases of construction clearly certified. Let's move on to a different scenario. You're buying an apartment that is part of a community of property owners. Which specific documents should you ask for? First, the Certificado de Deuda Cero. This is a certificate confirming the property is up to date with community fees. If there are unpaid community debts, they can become a problem linked to the property itself. So you want this certificate before you commit and definitely before you sign. Second, the actas or community meeting minutes. I know that lots of you are interested in buying property in Spain because of the short-term rentals. And let me tell you something. Doing it in apartments that are part of a community of property owners is quite hard nowadays, and it will be getting harder along the years. It's easier in villas and detached houses, but let me explain you a document that can give you a lot of useful information about this, and is the Estatutos de la Comunidad, or Community of Property Owners bylaws. I mean, this is what regulates what can be done and what cannot be done. I have a full video talking about short-term rentals, so just to share the basics. From April 2025, community of property owners have the right to register the prohibition of short-term rentals on this book. And even if they do not register, if you want to start the activity, you must get explicit authorization from them, and someone can think, okay, I'll just buy a property that already has a licencia turística or tourist license, and I will do the same. And it's not so easy. Here, it depends on the region because, yes, regions in Spain, the laws can be different, but it's not automatic that you buy a property that has a tourist license and you can immediately do it, because you will probably have to submit a new declaración responsable. This can take time. Maybe they ask for other documents. With this, be very careful if you're buying property for short-term rentals in apartments especially, and if you're buying them, as I said, in villas or detached houses, it can be easier. I'm not saying that the process is going to be straightforward because it takes time. The town halls are delaying this kind of processes in purpose. So yeah, I would really recommend you hiring an expert, and honestly, I tell you that on this field, I'm an expert. All right, so I already want to move to the contract section. I loved it while I was preparing, but I think it's also very important to point out the risks of buying property in Spain, the real risks, because some of them you might have heard them, some of them don't. So yes, this is the following chapter. It's very important that you listen to this, because most of the time when people come to me because they have problems that happened while the process of buying property in Spain, is because they didn't know these things could happen. Also, you might be thinking, of course, now he wants to scare me because he's a solicitor and that's his job. And I understand your point, but if you're watching this video up to now, you will see that this video is made from the purest honesty from both myself and my father and our professional experience, especially his. So the first risk is declaring a lower price or paying money in B. In the past, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was more common for people to declare a lower price than what they really paid. For example, buying a property for 600,000 euros, declaring 400,000 officially, and paying 200,000 off the record. Today, this is one of the fastest ways to create you a serious legal and tax problem. Why? First, tax risk. The Spanish tax office can review the transaction and issue what's called a complementary assessment. They can claim the difference plus interest plus penalties. And here's where the valor de referencia comes in. Spain now has a system where the tax office assigns a reference value to properties for tax purposes. So even if you officially buy for 100,000 euros, they may say, no, for tax purposes, this property is worth 150,000 euros or 200,000 euros, and you, the buyer, are the one who pays the difference. Later, you can try to go after the seller, but how do you prove what was paid unofficially? You cannot defend that. And another extra problem is that nowadays, there are a lot of foreign buyers, but a lot of also foreign sellers. So how are you going to do that if the seller is already in his home country? It's just not worth it. Second, banking and compliance risk. Spain has a strict anti-money laundering rules. Every euro used in a purchase must be justified. Banks ask where the funds come from. Notaries ask. Lawyers ask. This is not personal. And third, future resale problems. Think about it. If the declared price is lower than what you really paid, the moment you sell the property, the capital gains tax, the official capital gains tax, is going to be way higher than what it should be. So a saving in the beginning can become an extra cost in the future. And I understand that this was something that was done a lot in the past. And even today, there are some people that still do it. There are some lawyers that accept it, but it's just not worth it. I've seen people that have problems because of this. So the problems that this can cause are way bigger than what you're going to save. That is really minimum, because let's be honest, I said it at the beginning, what property taxes you have to pay. I understand that no one wants to pay taxes, but property taxes in Spain are not especially high, so it's just not worth it. Risk number 2, the 3% retention when the seller is non-resident. This one is extremely important, especially in coastal areas where there are lots of foreigners who spend less than 6 months a year in Spain. If the seller is non-resident in Spain, the buyer is legally obliged to retain 3% of the purchase price and pay it to the Spanish tax office on behalf of the seller. In the past, many people ignored this. The tax office didn't always chase it, but today it's a real risk. And what's more important, the obligation is yours as a buyer. So if this 3% retention, it's called Modelo 211. By the way, if you want help also with the Modelo 210 or Modelo 211, this 3%, we can completely help you out with this. So they are going to go after you as the buyer. And we go again to the same problem. Yes, you can then go after the seller, but the seller will be probably in his home country, and this is going to cost you way more than the 3%, so it's one of these risks that is really avoidable. Risk number 3, registered charges, mortgages, embargoes, annotation. For example, a seller tells you the mortgage is paid. That's good, but paid and formally cancelled are not the same thing. Until a mortgage is properly cancelled in the land registry, it is still legally attached to the property. The same goes for embargoes or court annotation. These appear in the registry, but they must be resolved correctly before completion. Because if something is not cleared correctly, you may discover it later when you try to sell, refinance, or register, and by then it's your problem. Urban planning, environmental limits, ley de costas, and hidden restrictions. Alright, this risk involves many other risks, so I will try to be as precise as possible, but this one is very important, especially if you're buying a countryside house or a villa, detached house, because this happens way more than what you would really think. Okay, let's start by the beginning, and I will start with an example. You buy a villa that has a swimming pool, a terrace, a garden, and yes, later you find out that the terrace was extended without proper legalization, the swimming pool is not fully compliant, or maybe the plot has limits that affect what you can build, reform, fence, or use in the future. And sometimes the issue is not even the house itself. Sometimes it is the land, the surroundings, or the public rules affecting that area. This is why I always say, in Spain, a property can look perfect in a viewing and still come with a very serious legal or administrative problem. Be very careful with this, because when you buy a property in Spain, it's going to be classified with a certain type of suelo. I think sol is the translation, if not this type of land. For example, suelo urbanizable, suelo no urbanizable. At least in Valencia or Alicante. So if you buy a property and you do illegal works on the property and it's with suelo no urbanizable, even if you wait 15 to 20 years, you are going to have a big problem. And I don't want to scare you, it's very unlikely that they will demolish your property, but you will definitely have problems. And I can tell you this because this is one of my areas of expertise. I did my thesis on the Declaración de Obra Nueva. Basically, some works that have been done in the property can prescribe if certain time had passed, but depending on the type of land, they cannot prescribe. So, well, this is also one of the reasons why I really beg you, when buying property in Spain, independent lawyer with you. You should also bear in mind la ley de costas and the restrictions near the sea. This is very important, especially for foreign buyers, because many of you are paying a premium precisely to be close to the sea. And near the coast, Spanish law has its own logic. In Spain, you will hear the term ley de costas. In English, you can think of it as the Spanish coastal law. And what matters for you is not the title of the law. What matters is the practical effect. Near the sea, there can be protected zones and legal restrictions that affect what you can build, reform, extend, fence, or even how the land is legally understood. So if you're buying close to the sea, this is not a minor check. Let me give you a brief example with Denia, where we also have one office. And here, there's a big problem now in Las Rotas, which is the premium area of Denia, because the Ley de Costas drew a new coastal line, or a new line, and basically it affects lots of restaurants that had been there for decades and properties that are on the first line. And of course, the neighbors are complaining. They hired a group of lawyers to defend themselves, of course, and this process is going to take years, but they are in a big problem. Not only because, okay, if that finally happens, they can lose a lot, but because the value of the properties, while this process is being held, that can take several years, of course, the properties are worth way less. So if you're buying property near the coast, especially on the first line, I would say this is very important, and honestly, there are not many lawyers that know about the coastal law or Ley de Costas, because it's something that really depends on each region, that require a lot of study. So this is one of situations where you want the best legal advice possible. And lastly, flood risk, barrancos, ramblas, and environmental reality. This one is becoming more and more important. Some houses look incredible because of their setting: open views, natural surroundings, privacy, beautiful land. But sometimes that beautiful setting comes with practical environmental risk. A house may sit next to a barranco, a dry riverbed, a rambla, or an area that looks completely harmless most of the year, until it's not. And this is where I like to be direct. Before you fall in love with a villa, do a quick flood risk check. Some beautiful houses sit next to a dry riverbed that is not dry when it matters. I'm not saying that every house near a barranco is a bad property purchase. Not at all. For example, a few months ago, we attended some German clients that wanted to buy a house in Castellón, very good price. And when we were doing the due diligence, we found out that the property had serious flooding risk, but they accepted it with it. But at least you have to know, because imagine if you don't know and something like this happened and it's like, oh my God. Especially in the coastal areas, at least in Alicante, Valencia, the climate is a lot like, it's sunny most of the years, but whenever it rains in October, November, it rains a lot. And well, you know what happened in Valencia a few years ago with the Dana incidents. Many locations around Valencia suffered a lot because of, well, they had high flooding risk, but nothing happened there for the last 30, 50 years. And then suddenly a huge storm happened, and well, it was very sad. So yeah, this is something very important to check. For servidumbres, rights of way, and hidden third-party rights. This is less common than the previous points, but when it appears, it matters a lot, especially in villas, country houses, and plots. You think you are buying a fully private plot. Then later, you discover there is a right-of-way across part of the land, or a shared access road, or underground pipes, or utility cables, or a neighbor who legally passes through part of what you thought was entirely yours. In Spain, one of the words you may hear is servidumbre. In English, that is usually translated as an easement or a right affecting the land. And the real problem here is not the legal word, it's the practical. You want to fence the property, you want privacy, you want to change the entrance, you want to reform something, and suddenly you cannot because someone else has a right over part of that land. This is a serious risk, and is basically buying a property with someone inside. Now, you would think, who would do that? But okay, now I'll give you 3 different scenarios, and I consider this very important because it's connected to the famous concept that maybe you have heard about of ocupas or squatters, basically people that are living in your house without the right of doing so. It can happen. Well, let's go to the different scenarios so you understand completely this and the best way to avoid it. The first scenario is legal tenant with a valid rental contract. You buy without clearly confirming if the property is rented out. Surprise! You now have tenants legally entitled to stay. You must respect the rental contract until its agreed expiration, losing immediate access to your house. Second, informal occupants. These are gray cases. Common examples: a seller's family member refusing to move out, former tenants not paying rent but still occupying, Third, a seller's ex-partner or acquaintance with unclear occupancy rights. Evicting these occupants can take months or even years. Spanish courts are slow, and cases involving vulnerable individuals take even longer. Third, illegal occupants or ocupas or squatters. Occupants who entered without any right. Even here, eviction is complicated, expensive, and can stretch into a lengthy legal battle, especially if minors or vulnerable people are involved. My professional advice, or what I tell my clients, is explicitly confirm before signing anything that the property is vacant. Confirm in both contracts and in the notarial deed that you're buying a property vacant of tenants before notary completion if you can. Visit the property and do not accept signing now, giving the keys later. When you're signing in the notary, you're giving the keys. Now let's talk about contracts, because this step usually happens right after you've negotiated price and terms with the seller. From the moment you agree on terms and say yes, to the moment you sign the final deed at the notary, there are several key steps that need to be crystal clear. Here's a quick summary of how it usually goes. Verbal offer, reservation contract, Arras contract, private purchase contract, optional but highly recommended in most cases, and final deed at the notary. Step 1. Reservation contract. At this point, you have found the property and you're ready to take it off the market. Typically, this starts with signing a reservation contract and paying small deposit, between 2,000 to 10,000 euros, depending on the property, the region, and the total price. This step is straightforward but very important. It temporarily takes the property off the market and sets out basic terms agreed between you and the seller. Usually, real estate agencies already have a template for this. Here's something crucial that many people miss. Ideally, you would come to us before signing the reservation contract. However, many people call us once they signed this reservation contract. It's not a catastrophic at all, because the reservation contract is very small and it sets out the basic conditions. But the sooner you get independent legal advice, the better. Anyways, if you're signing a reservation contract and you've watched this video, so you are well prepared, you are going to know what should be included, what clause should be included in this reservation contract. The deposit will be fully refunded if hidden charges, urban planning issues, or significant legal problems are discovered during subsequent due diligence. Let me share a quick secret from the real-world experience. A well-drafted reservation contract can work as a safety net, and more than that, as something that gives you extra flexibility and time. Because I cannot say 100%, but it's almost impossible to find a property that is 100% perfect. So this is something that you should bear in mind, because at the end, you are already paying money. But okay, it's a reservation contract, it's the very beginning. So let's move on to the second step that is more serious. Contrato de arras, or earnest money deposit. This agreement sets clear penalties if anyone backs out. Usually, the penalty is around 10% of the property's price, minus the amount you have already paid at the reservation stage. There are different types of arras. By the way, I have a whole video talking about this. I will leave it in the description of the video, but let me summarize what these arras can be. Arras penitenciales. These are recommended in most cases. It allows either party to withdraw by paying a penalty. If you back out, you lose your deposit. If the seller backs out, they must pay you double your deposit. Another type, arras confirmatorias, is essentially a down payment. If anyone breaches, the other party can enforce the sale through the courts. Sounds harsh, but sometimes confirmatorias can benefit buyers in very specific scenarios. In hot property markets like ours here on the Costa Blanca, Javian, Moraira, Calpe, Denia, Benidorm, Alicante, prices rise quickly. Imagine this scenario. From your first offer to final closing takes around 6 months. Prices could significantly increase in that time, so much so that the seller might consider backing out, even if it means paying double your deposit, because another buyer is willing to pay substantially more. Against popular belief, arras penitenciales do not always benefit just the buyer. Often they protect sellers too, especially in a rising market. And then we have the arras penales, but I don't think it's worth mentioning them. If you want to know more about this, check the video down in the description. But now let's move on into something very important, and it's the step 3, and it's the contrato privado de compraventa, or property purchase private contract. Now, strictly speaking, you could go directly from arras to the notary. It's not obligatory to do the purchase property private contract, but it's very recommendable. At least for the property purchase transactions that we do, we always prepare this kind of contract. Why? Because this is where you define the exact completion date, the exact purchase price breakdown, the payment method and timing, the furniture and inventory, the deadlines for canceling charges, the utility situation, the delivery conditions, the tax responsibilities, and specific obligations of both parties. An arras contract is often relatively short and focused on the deposit and penalties. A private purchase contract goes deeper. It removes ambiguity. It protects you against misunderstanding. And most disputes in property transactions do not happen because someone had bad intention. They happen because something was not clearly written. Even in easy deals, this contract gives you structure and certainty, and in more complex transactions, renovations, stage payments, inherited properties, properties with small irregularities, it becomes essential. And finally, after you found the property, due diligence, all the contracts, the signing day at the notary, the day that the property will be yours. Well, of course, this day is very important. You shouldn't go to the notary that day with questions. Everything should be clear. Of course, you can make questions, but the reality is that notaries in Spain are usually packed, so it's not like you have a full hour to revise everything, although you will. You get the borrador, so you can read everything, but this should be done beforehand. So basically, I could say this is the day you sign, they give you the keys, and the property is yours. But if I'm making the most complete guide on buying property in Spain, I think the notary signing day should be structured into different parts so you know absolutely everything. The safest and most recommended payment methods, why the notary will conduct specific checks regarding your funds, and practical solutions to temporarily safeguard funds in complex transactions. When buying property in Spain, the most common methods for payment at the notaries are bank transfer or transferencia bancaria, bank certified check or cheque bancario, or personal check, cheque nominativo. Now, cash payments. Yes, they are possible, but there are strict rules about it. General limit. Payments in cash are limited to 1,000 euros per transaction if either party is a professional or a business. But for foreign non-residents, the limit increases to 10,000 euros only if the paying individual is a non-resident in Spain without a tax domicile here. In practical terms, even if the 10,000 euros limit applies to you as a non-resident buyer, I strongly recommend against using cash payments for significant property transactions. The reason is simple. It significantly complicates AML procedures, transparency requirements, and can even hinder or delay registration at the land registry. AML or anti-money laundering requirements, or basically why the notary asks questions. This is something many international buyers find surprising or even intrusive, but it's legally mandatory, and it's when the notary asks you, where do your funds come from? What is your occupation or source of income? Why is the payment coming from a particular bank account? It is not curiosity, it's mandatory compliance with the Spanish and European anti-money laundering laws, Ley 10/2010 de Prevención del Blanqueo de Capitales. These rules obligate the notary to clearly identify and document the origin and legitimacy of funds, the exact method and traceability of payments, and the transparency of parties involved. Securing your funds with escrow or custody accounts. This is something that concerns many international buyers. they have asked me a lot about escrow accounts. And the exact equivalent doesn't exist in Spain, but there are several ways to do this. We're going to see all of them and give you my honest recommendation and for sure the safest and simplest one. A. Personal trust or third-party custody. Not recommended. Paying the deposit or reservation directly to a third party's personal bank account, such as an agent or intermediary, is risky. There is minimal legal protection and limited transparency. B. Client trust account or cuenta de cliente de abogado. Possible, but with care. If your lawyer offers this service, they must comply strictly with legal and professional obligations under Spanish regulations. This means the lawyer must use a separate, clearly identified bank account specifically reserved for client funds. And C. Official notary deposit or Depósito Notarial. This is strongly recommended. This is my preferred option and provides the highest security for property transactions in Spain. How it works: the notary formally receives funds into a dedicated, officially documented deposit account. Release of these funds to the seller only occurs after conditions stipulated in the deed, Escritura Pública, have been met, such as complete registration checks, clearance of any encumbrances, or confirmations of licenses, etc. Advantages: completely neutral party, the notary, who is legally and professionally bound to impartiality. Funds remain fully traceable and documented, and significant legal protection in case of disputes or complications. Some considerations: not all notaries provide this service. At our firm, we coordinate exclusively with notaries who do it. It incurs additional fees, but these are minor compared to the security and transparency benefits provided. And yes, now that you know everything about payment methods, notaries, the notary signing day finally comes, and it's basically about revising everything that I've been saying all along the video, that everything matches on what has been agreed. Very important that even if this is true, the reality is that you will go into the notary, it's going to be packed, you will get into a room, you might be waiting there 20 minutes to 1 hour, you will get a borrador of the public deed so you can read it by yourself, but that day should be relaxing. The hard work must be done before going to the notary. All the numbers must be done before going to the notary, because if and there shouldn't be any argue about, no, but you said this and now you said that. No, that day must be everything's done, and it's about, of course, you have to make sure that the data is correct, that the numbers match, but even if you are correcting it, you are confirming it because you've done the week before. So now you are like second or third confirming, which makes everything more easy. And well, I say this because I see my father that really insists on me on this, and he's very right, because if not, it's all about stress, not trusting the others. And well, this is my last piece of advice on everything that has to do with this. But now, before moving into what happens after you bought the property and after the property is basically yours, I would like to share with you some clauses that I think will protect you in the contracts. Of course, this is not something like, okay, I will just use these clauses and the contract is 100% perfect. No, because there is a contract that is the same for two properties. There's always, or at least a good contract should really bear in mind the singularities of the property and the small things that around the property. But I think this, as a general piece of advice, is very valuable. And yes, I love doing this. I'm going to say it now. I'm not going to wait until the end of the video. This video, preparing the script, took me more than 2 months, and recording this video is taking me more than 3 days. But well, besides of my work as solicitor in Spain, tax advisor, I really love the creative side of it, explaining things right. I really appreciate now that I got to meet some subscribers because they hired my services. They came to Moraira or to Denia in person, and it's like, you explain things very well, and I really feel happy about it. So if you're enjoying the video, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button, you subscribe, you share it, because yes, this took a lot of work, but yes, let's continue. The property in Spain is finally yours. Congratulations, but you still need some things to do. That's what we're going to be seeing now. I'll try to be as direct as possible. The first of them is basically changing the locker on the first day. This is very important. If you watch the previous chapter about the risk of buying property in Spain, you will understand it immediately. And also on the very first day, you go and take photos of electricity, water, and gas meters. This is something that will avoid potential silly arguments. Now, the practical side of the ownership. Utilities, water, electricity should be transferred into your name. This is something that we include in our legal fees, so it's not just until the notary, but until this is done properly. And also, but this only applies if you're planning to buy your property in Spain because you want to move permanently here, you should do empadronamiento. This is basically registering with the town hall of the place where you're buying the property. It's very simple, but misunderstanding that I'm seeing more and more is becoming tax resident and getting this empadronamiento. It is not exactly the same. All right, so you understand it. You can have empadronamiento and still be a non-tax resident. Of course, if you have empadronamiento, the Spanish tax agency can consider that it's more probable that you're living here more than 6 months a year, but it's not necessarily. So I hope this explains everything. And besides this, now let's answer to a big question that I think it's very interesting. At the beginning of the video, I talked about the taxes when buying property in Spain. Now we're going to see the cost of owning a property in Spain. Imagine you bought a property in Alicante for 1 million euros. A realistic annual EB bill could easily be somewhere around 1,500 to 2,500 euros depending on the property. Then add the rubbish collection fee, which is usually much smaller, but it's still there every year. Think roughly 100 to 200 euros. Now, two things on this. The EB is the local property tax, and the rubbish collection fee, what I said about how much you have to pay is true, but I even saw some cases, especially in the last 2 years, where this fee is even higher. So double check before buying the property, because these are costs that you're going to be paying every year. Of course, home insurance, internet, garden maintenance. This is the kind of things that really depends on each person's situation. And also, bear in mind that Spain has the wealth tax. Now, if you are a tax resident in Spain, you will pay wealth tax on your worldwide income. If you are not tax resident in Spain, you will pay only wealth tax based on the value of the property. But again, lots of regions in Spain have big exemptions where usually people have to pay either 0 to few hundred euros. But it really depends if you are a tax resident or not. So just remember it. I will prepare future videos of becoming tax resident in Spain, and I will deal with this in depth because it's very interesting. But I just wanted to give you these highlights. Another question that I get a lot is, how long does the process of buying a property in Spain take? And the answer is that I've seen when both parties want to move fast and everything's clean from the seller's side, let's say that 1 month, but it's barely impossible because even if the property is in good shape, there are always things to do. Every property is a different story. So let's say average time 2 to 3 months. I've also seen cases where it can be extended to 6 months because, I don't know, the property has an embargo or a mortgage, but it really depends on the case. And a last advice, and then I'll give you the timeline. So in case some lazy people came straight to the end of the video, they can enjoy at least some of the information. But serious advice that I give you is that right after you bought the property in Spain, you prepare a Spanish will. I have videos talking about this, but I will just say that it makes the process much easier when it's time to inherit. It's not necessary, but it's very, very recommendable. And of course, how could I forget it? Right after you've bought the property in Spain, you've got 30 days to pay your taxes. This is very important because if not, you will get a sanction, which is not huge, but well, we recently attended some clients and we did everything. We told them, look, you've got to pay the taxes. And well, they didn't, so they just got a sanction. So I hope watching this video avoids you of this. It's just paying your taxes on time, 30 days. And also right after the notary, so not that same day, but you have to take the public deed to the land registry and everything's done. So if I had to give you a practical timeline, I would explain it like this. Weeks 1 to 2, you define your budget, your strategy, and then start the practical setup. That may include your NI number, Spanish bank account if you need one, and deciding whether you're buying with a mortgage or not. Weeks 3 to 6, you search, visit properties, make offers, and once you find the right one, you usually move into the reservation stage. Weeks 4 to 8, this is where the serious work happens: legal due diligence, document checks, contract drafting, and, if relevant, mortgage and valuation. Weeks 8 to 12, final funds are prepared, the last legal and practical details are checked, and then you go to the notary to sign. First 30 days after signing, taxes are filed, the deed goes to the land registry, and the practical takeover of the property is completed properly. It can be faster or it can take longer, but I hope this helps you picture the process. And well, this was the video about buying property in Spain. Wow, I feel super happy right now. It's the biggest piece of work that I've done in my life, studying for several months just to prepare this video, preparing the script, talking to my father, talking to architects, looking for information, thinking. So when I was preparing the script, I deal with clients every week. So I was like, okay, now I see that this person that wants to buy property is worried about this. I think I should include it on the script. So yeah, I feel very proud right now, and I will feel super happy when I see that this video is actually helpful for you. So if that's the case, you can leave a comment. I would really appreciate the like button and you subscribing to the channel. This helps a lot. And well, if you want help with the process of buying property in Spain, especially in Alicante, Costa Blanca, but actually anywhere, especially in Balearic Islands, Murcia, I said anywhere, so anywhere we can help you. You're seeing here the email, the WhatsApp, and please check the description and the pinned comment because there you will find all the information. I will be preparing more videos than this. So complete guides on all kinds of properties, on regions of Spain. So, well, there are a lot of things coming up, but yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you watched the video, and yes, thank you y nos vemos pronto. Adiós, gracias.